How's life? It's going to be a great evening talking to Goldie Hawn about Mind Up and mindfulness. And before I invite you here, I just want to talk about mindlessness first, before we talk about mindfulness. Because when I came to this country, my first experience was in an emergency room. And within 5 minutes, we had a cardiac arrest. Everybody rushed, did their rituals mindlessly, and tried to resuscitate this patient who unfortunately died. And then we all went outside and had a cigarette. Those were the days. I remember training in the best institutions in Boston with the best medical schools. And I can tell you, it took me a long time to realize that medical practice was totally mindless. Nurses would wake up patients in the middle of the night to give them their sleeping pills. Mr. Smith, would you please wake up? I have to give you your sleeping pill. It was many years later that I realized that our mechanistic system of medicine wasn't working at all. And I became very intrigued when I saw that some patients would recover no matter what, and some patients would die no matter what. And it became very obvious that the human biology is very unpredictable. If you restore the human body to its original state, it repairs itself. And to any experience, there are two components. There's awareness, and there's what you're aware of. That's all the sum total of what you can be aware of. But there's something deeper than that, and that's the one who is aware of the things that you're aware of. And that's the great gift that human beings have, to be self-aware, which is the highest form of human knowledge. So before I invite Goldie to the stage, just try this. As you're listening to me, turn your attention to the one who's listening. So as you're listening to me, be aware of the listener. That consciousness that you experience right now, that's you. It's not your mind, which might be saying, I wish I'd gone to the bathroom before the thing started. It's the real you, in which thoughts come and go, feelings come and go, perceptions of the world come and go, even bodies come and go. Please welcome Goldie Hawn. So, Goldie, we've never had to turn away so many people.
That's so
All your
great.
fans are here.
So happy you're here.
Yeah, and Goldie Hawn is, everyone knows who she is, so I don't need to tell you about Academy Award-winning actress and all the things she's done. We want to go a little deeper than that, right?
Good. I'm glad we're going deeper than that.
I've known Goldie for 20 years. We bumped into each other in hotel lobbies in India.
I wanted to see you, I wanted to meet you, and we had dinner together.
Right.
And you started reciting Rumi poetry.
That's right.
And I was so enamored with all of this, plus your dulcet tones, your healing sound. And I just thought I had died and gone to heaven.
Oh.
So that's when I started studying Rumi, these incredible, ecstatic expressions of love and devotion.
But your spiritual experiences go back a long time. You were telling me about what happened at 6 years of age.
I was very young. I was actually 10, and I knew that there was something more than me. I had a sense that there was a greater God, right? And I was raised Jewish, and I definitely had a sense of that, but I felt very close to whatever the idea was of God. It brought me a lot of peace. So I started reading the Bible just on my own and came across the 23rd Psalm that I used to repeat every night before I went to sleep. And it
Not
really
everyone knows the
Well, that was the yea, though I walked through the shadow of the valley of death, thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. It's that one. Anyway, I was a very spiritual young girl, and I knew that there was a lot of things that we didn't see that really did exist. And that's how it started, you know, in terms of my understanding a deeper spiritual life, more meaning to my life.
And then when you became a teenager, you were go-go dancing?
Yeah, well, I was a dancer. You know, from God to go-go. I mean, that's like fabulous. A perfect connection. No, I was dancing ever since I was 3 years old, so that was really going to be my vocation. And then I went to New York City to dance at the World's Fair, which was really exciting. What happened is when I became successful in the chorus line, I was picked up out of the chorus line by an agent. The next thing I knew, I was suddenly on a television show. It was acting. I wasn't in my comfort zone. It isn't really what I expected that I was going to be doing, because I thought I was going to go home and open a dancing school and get married and be happy, because happiness was probably the most important thing in my life. And everybody in Hollywood was unhappy.
Yes.
As far as
still.
And I thought, I don't want to be like those people. At any rate, I had tremendous anxiety. I got very depressed. I was 21. And I had anxiety attacks. And when I would go into public, I would get nauseous, and I would break into a sweat, and I'd lost my smile, and it was something that was really frightening to me. So I went to a psychologist, and I knew that I had to find out what was wrong with me, because it wasn't me. And when we talk about who is the person witnessing the person that's witnessing it, I was self-aware that I was deeply disturbed, really unhappy, and that person that I'm seeing now was not the person that I'd experienced before. So taking responsibility for that, I went to see someone, and for 9 years, I did a real excavation of my own mind and my own psyche and my own purpose and my own connection to my family and my relationships, and mostly my relationship to me. So it also took me through my success, because when people come up and they know you and they perceive you to be a certain way, it can be very daunting, because that's someone else's energy and perception that's coming onto you, and it may not be correct. And if you don't like yourself, then you're really going to be angry with people when they say they love you. So it's best you love yourself first, so then you can honor their love, right? So it really gave me perspective as to the fact that that's only an imprint that I was getting from someone else's perspective. At that point in time, I decided that I wanted a deeper spiritual life. And it's when I became initiated into the Maharishi Mahesh Yoga, his transcendental meditation. And then I started practicing. And it was a very profound experience for me. For the first time in my life, I really connected to the deepest joy in my heart. It's like somebody just opened the door to my heart. I felt connected to my being in a way that I met my deepest self. And it was, I think I couldn't stop giggling. I felt like I just wanted to giggle. This is a feeling I've never forgotten, and I know that it's mine, it's our gift.
And right now, you're experiencing that feeling again,
I am.
Right?
I'm sure if I was in an fMRI, you'd see it in my brain right now.
The limbic brain.
Exactly, it's going crazy. But my daughter Katie asked me when she was 4, "Mommy, is God my cousin?" And I said, well, oh boy, this was a tough one. I said, well, actually, yeah. And I think that God could be many things, all things around us. I said, but you know, here's what I could tell you what God is like. I said, God feels a certain way. So I said, do you know that feeling just before you're going to laugh? Like that giggle? That
bliss. It's called bliss.
It's bliss. Right in here. I said, that's what God is. That's that feeling. And had I never experienced that one moment, I never would have known that. I couldn't have shared that with her. So it really was extraordinary. So that long-winded way is the beginning.
That is the exact experience that you spoke about in Indian wisdom traditions called Satchitananda. Sat means the truth. Chit means consciousness or knowingness, you know. intuition or creativity or knowingness, and Ananda is the blissful pre-giggle experience. You know, they used to call Maharishi the giggling guru. When he first came in 1959 to this country, people in the press started saying he's got this amazing technique that helps people to go to sleep. And he said, oh, I thought I came to wake them up when they say it's about going to sleep. But, you know, I think we live in such an anxiety-driven, stressful society that the best thing we can think of is how to manage stress, when in fact the real purpose of meditation is to find that peace and equanimity and love and joy that you experience. Let's move fast, fast forward. You then suddenly, sometime in your life, had this insight that this is what children needed?
Yes, I think the insight really came from my love of people. I love children, and children are pure potential. We are now in a time where life has changed dramatically after 9/11. I had an instinct that the world would never be the same again, that it was changing. I realized our kids are going to be suffering some sort of silent distress that we don't know about. And I thought to myself, what could I do, just me, to give something back to children on a larger scale, to change the way they think, to change the way they feel, to give them tools, if you will, to manage their emotions, to reduce their own stress, to become self-aware, to actually try to put a little more humanity back into the human. So that's why I created this curriculum. Because I thought if we put it into schools, that we would at least be able to have some hearts and minds that would be able to shift and change from an early age. So we did understanding the brain, giving them context to emotion. We give them 3 times a day brain breaks. What they do is they breathe, they focus, they listen to a bell, they love it, they ask for it, and this is part of the curriculum. Then we do mindful of our senses. So it brings them back into themselves, gives them self-awareness, engages them into their classroom, into their life, makes it they all matter inside of what they perceive to hear. Very important to have children feel that what they are thinking, feeling, and hearing and perceiving has value. Then we do the other part, which is acts of kindness in the community or to each other. We do gratitude journals because you know the research on gratitude is amazing. Children start to do their and rework the way their neurology is set up. They can actually feed and change neural connections by doing this habitually. We also do perspective taking. And what happens is throughout we've created an optimistic classroom. Scholastic has published all of our curriculum, and it really embeds in all of their curriculum itself. My dream is that we could build through our schools, through our education system, a new way of helping children see the world, become engaged in the world, extreme empathy, to have people who are giving. Today our children are not empathetic. They've lost empathy. They are 1 in 3 is medicated today.
I wanted to just say that this book is on the New York Times bestseller list, 10 Mindful Minutes, and it's about some of the things that Goldie's been talking about. I'm sure you're familiar with her previous book, also a New York Times bestseller, Goldie, A Lotus Grows in the Mud. And that's the beauty of the lotus, that it reaches for the heavens and grows in the mud. So your program, Mind Up, has 4 components, basically. You said focus, attention, and intention.
Exactly.
And then you have this experience of the mindfulness of the 5 senses.
Right.
Then you have attitude training.
Right.
And then finally you have acts of kindness.
Right.
So we're talking about being, feeling, thinking, doing, right? Okay. Now what is very interesting, and you have a lot of good data to show this, that these children improve across the board in not only their self-esteem, but in their relationships and in their academic
reading scores went up, math scores. We have that's very important for our educators to know, because they're obviously concerned about that. That, of course, is just a result of a happy child. Because when children are happier, when they're contented, when they feel less stressed, the neurobiology actually shows that when the mind and the body is less stressed, the executive function works better, and we actually can learn, we can focus for longer periods of time, we can retain information differently. So the children are sort of ready for learning. And that's really what it is. It's setting the groundwork for learning and feeling and caring. And so this is, I think, where we would like to go. In fact, we should bring it to Congress. Definitely bring it to Congress so they can get along.
So, and you've now been gathering this data. There's empirical evidence that self-esteem,
well, the optimism went way up.
Optimism goes up.
Aggression went down on the playground, so that's bullying. The other part is we did cortisol testing. So our children were more able to manage the levels of their cortisol than the children in the control group could not at all. The other piece we did, which was we're going to be going deeper with Mishi Jha at University of Miami, but we did with Adele Diamond, we did a prefrontal executive, which is where we showed that our children in Mind Up were much quicker on the uptake, literally had retained information better, and were able to show that their executive function was much more apt to answer questions and be more present in that time period, which was extraordinary results.
So let me just take this a little further with our audience, because you already know all this and you've had this experience, but our brain has 3 parts to itself. If you make a fist like this, this is your friend Daniel Siegel calls this the handy model of the brain, okay? So this part is your spinal cord, okay? Which, takes care of autonomic function. This fleshy part here of the thumb, that's your midbrain. It's also called the reptilian brain because it's about 300 million years old, and it's responsible for mediating stress and what's called the fight-flight response. In medical school, we used to say the 4 Fs, feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproduction.
I dare you.
This is the one that gets you into trouble, okay? Now, if you go a little further here, you open your fist, this part is called the limbic brain. And this is your emotional brain. So when you feel things like love, compassion, or equanimity, or joy, all the things that you felt, this part regulates homeostasis, which means self-repair, and regulates the balance of hormones. There are hormones secreted in the brain called things like, you've heard these names, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, opiates, endorphins. While these make you feel good, they're also immunomodulators. They modulate the activity of the immune system. So you're actually balancing your immune system. You don't have an aggressive immune system because that can give you allergies and autoimmune disease. You don't have an underactive immune system. You have a balanced immune system. And then when you reflect, as you've been reflecting, on what am I here for, what's my real purpose, who am I, then your frontal cortex gets activated, this big part of the brain, and that is the place where we have insight and intuition and self-awareness, imagination, creativity, free will. Critical thinking. And that's what you were saying, the executive function. Okay, so just through these very simple practices, and this is not hearsay anymore. When 20, 30 years ago, we used to think of this intuitively, but now, as you said, if you do a functional magnetic resonance scan, you can actually see that the experience of mindfulness and all those 4 things that you spoke of in your program, focused attention, intention, the experience of senses, 5 senses, touch, sight, taste, smell, sound, when you are aware, mindfully aware of your sensory experience, you're mindfully aware of making choices. The other day there was somebody from Thich Nhat Hanh's group at our center. And somebody said, but this reptilian brain really gets me into trouble. You know, every time I hear the news or, you know, somebody says something to me that's mean-spirited, I react. And this person who was from Thich Nhat Hanh's group, he said, before you do anything, take a deep breath, take a smile to yourself,
Right.
breathe 3 times, and then respond. So if the phone rings, don't pick it up. Okay? The phone rings, could be anybody. Take a deep breath, smile, count to 3, let it ring for 3 times, then pick it up and say hello with a smile, and you'll have broken the reptilian brain's automatic response. It's just, instead of reacting, just observe your reaction to react.
I have something funny to
Yeah.
show you. So today I get this email explaining this study, I think it was at Stanford. And it's a study of the brain, okay, and where we lean toward in terms of how our brain activates, right? That's whether you're a conservative,
Oh, yes.
or whether you're
The political
a liberal.
brain.
It's the political brain. So there was, you know, research done on this, which was fascinating, is that the conservatives had more gray matter around their amygdala.
Amygdala is where,
It was fascinating.
where you don't want to take risks, by the way. That's amygdala.
And it also reacts like, you know, it's
Fear.
a big fear. It's all about reactive. So they found this difference in that the people who were more liberal really liked change, and they were, you know, mobile and so on and so forth. But the differences was fascinating. So the question was free will. At what point can you change your brain? Because I've never known to be able to change a conservative's mind, ever. So, not that I can't be conservative in certain ways, right? I don't want to like make this like that. But it's interesting about that.
Yeah, no, they call this cognitive bias, which means no matter what the facts presented to you, you go with your bias, and in fact, you reinforce your point of view, no matter what the facts are.
Exactly.
And the amygdala, of course, is the place that mediates fear, amongst other things. Here's another study that I came across recently. If you listen to somebody with empathy, their amygdala cools down. Okay, so it shrinks. They become less fearful, and their cortisol level goes down, and their adrenaline goes down just by acting empathetically. You affect somebody else's brain.
So can you imagine if we actually trained our teachers this while they were actually in college, a pre-service ability to understand how to do this? But more importantly, I think husbands and wives need to be able to do this. That is, when someone's angry, to look at them with compassion and empathy and basically quiet them down. Wouldn't that be, that's a great tool, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, I just noticed 50 Cent is here.
Will it work if the person senses that you're doing it on purpose? Like if they say something and you just look like...
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Interesting.
it has to be authentic, obviously. It has to be authentic.
That's a really good question, though. It's like, I know what you're doing.
I promised Curtis we're going to make him fly one of these days.
Oh, God, I think it would be awesome.
She knows that's a fact, by the way. So here's a thought that came to me right now. You know, when you were speaking about children, the great Indian poet Tagore said, every child that's born is proof that God has not yet given up on human beings. That no child is actually born violent. No child is born a terrorist. No child is born to kill or to rape or to murder or to pillage. And yet, you know, we are trying to find superficial solutions to this when our best hope for a planetary civilization is actually the nurturing of our children and the care of our mothers. Because the mothers are nurturing this little thing in their womb, and now there's all this amazing data that the stress in a mother and her environment actually affects the neurotransmitters and the hormonal system and the actual structure of the so-called brain. So if there's one thing we can do to change humanity, is actually to elevate motherhood to the most noble profession in the world, and really to see that the future of our civilization is totally dependent on children, while we, spend all this time and money and energy, $2 billion a week on war. I think it's all connected, that the time has come where we've reached a tipping point where humanity is saying no more.
Right.
And we have to start with our children.
Looking at children, you realize, well, if we rearrange the way we nurture our children in the classroom, that we begin to change the way and give them the tools to think differently and look at problems from 100,000 feet up, rather than being in the center of them where they can't make a decision. This kind of gift, I think, I was talking to Arnie Duncan years ago about this, and our schools aren't as broken as our children are. And what are the systemic reasons why they're killing themselves? They're dropping out of school, they're on medication, they're self-medicating, they're depressed. We're medicating our own children, 3, and that's 1 in 3 is just what's reported. So are we really raising a generation of children that's on drugs because they can't focus? They can focus.
Of course.
They just have to be shown how.
So I think people should know that you have the Hawn Foundation, which is a public charity devoted to equipping children with social, emotional skills to lead smarter, healthier, happier lives. And the program is Mind Up. It's called the Mind Up program, and there's a 15-part syllabus that's developed by you through Scholastic.
Right, but it was developed by neuroscientists and doctors and positive psychology practitioners as well, teachers.
So you have neuroscientists and teachers involved. And this kind of research has actually literally led to a new field called neuroplasticity, which means the way you think, the way you feel, the way you behave influences not only your own neural networks and the way they're wired up, the saying that neurons that fire together wire together. So you're changing your brain, but you're also changing the brain of those that you interact with. So, your mind is not just in your brain, it's relational. So when you interact with somebody, you not only regulate and monitor, you're also being regulated and monitored by the other person. We're so interconnected that we actually depend on each other for our emotional well-being, but we also depend on each other on our physical well-being, because your emotional well-being actually affects my emotional well-being and my physical well-being. And this data from Gallup, which says that if you have a happy friend, your happiness goes up by 15%. But if your happy friend has a happy friend whom you don't know, it goes up by another 10%. And it keeps extending to the point that the happiness of your enemies is good for your health. The happiness of your, we should say, perceived enemies.
Perceived enemies, exactly.
Is good for your health. And you're actually changing the neural structure of your brain.
Completely right. I mean, think of these implications and what could happen, especially starting at young, where children are self-aware. Then stress reduction actually becomes something you know how to do.
Yeah, and stress reduction is the prelude to joy, to bliss, to knowingness, to creativity, to imagination, and to relationship, and all the things that make human life worthwhile.
If you've got innovation, creativity, and we're giving our kids the minds and the mind space and the way to do this, we're going to be a more creative society and innovative. Because at the moment, our children are so overscheduled and so many demands and so much is expected of them that they just want to give up. They're just burned out by the time. So it's sort of like give our children some space to, to be.
Talk about the foundation and where the future of Mind Up.
It looks like we're going to be implementing in Miami. I spoke to the school superintendent there, and we're going to be implementing there and doing actual research on the kids. with CAPS. So we're going to be able to start looking at their neurology and their sort of, what do you call it, brain activity. Because we want to look at attention. Is that how does this program and this 3 times a day or 4 times a day brain break help develop attention skills for the kids? Because obviously that's a big issue. So that's the one thing that we're doing. We're also in about 20 schools in Newark right now. So we're working in Newark, we're in Chicago, we're moving around, we're doing great stuff.
And over 1,000 classrooms, educators in the UK and in the United States.
US and Canada. Yeah, and that I think is an old number. I think it's grown from
So how can people get involved with your foundation?
Well, how can you get involved? First, you can tell everybody about it. Secondly, you can send in a donation to us. We work on donations.
Website?
The website is www.thehawnfoundation.org. And help us. It's, you know, frankly, it's, as we break it down, it's about $10 a child.
Amazing, isn't it? $10 a child,
right,
to bring the next phase transition in humanity if we all get
exactly.
together. You know, it's one child at a time.
Right, it is.
Goldie's book is 10 Mindful Minutes, and it's a really worthwhile read. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. There's nothing more important, I think, than what you're doing right now, and I just want to thank you so much for giving people giving people this experiential knowledge through their children. So we don't stop with the children. We go beyond that now to the teachers, and
right,
to everybody.
Right. Building all of these components. Parent, I think, is important. That's why I wrote that book, because the parents actually came to me from the program and said, but what about us? I mean, how do we learn how to do this with our lives? So I had no idea that it was going to, there was such hunger out there.
And you know, while science can give us all this validation, we don't really need science. I mean, do you measure your oxytocin level before you decide to marry the woman you love? You know? And yet, you know, this is where we've gotten in science. I want the data. Well, the data is there.
Wait a minute.
Okay.
You need data when one of our children actually spent 2 years contemplating suicide and telling his mother, and then after the program, after 6 months, he never spoke of suicide again. Or one child couldn't sleep for 2 years because he was afraid of bullying and suddenly had his first night's sleep. And you need data for that? I mean, that's the part, and by the way, I'm not against data. I'm fascinated with research. I know you are too. But there are self-reporting, there are things that just that are inarguable. And yes, it helps children. It just helps them regulate their lives. It puts them back in control. So go tell it to the judge.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a little bit of time for questions. So also, by the way, at the end of this program, if you feel like it, you have any comments, questions, you want to participate in an ongoing conversation, then go to deepakhomebase.com and you can post your questions. We'll try our best to respond to you.
Hey, Goldie.
Hi.
One of the things that I think that's amazing about what you're doing is you're helping children understand that there's hope, and that you're helping them understand that they can lead better lives, live better lives. I know that you're going into schools. Can you talk a little bit about what you're actually hearing from the kids themselves when you go into the schools?
Right. Well, a couple of the things is as I told you, I've heard about this one particular classroom that I went to that was very, very, very troubled. And these two things were about sleeping. One was about more joy for school. One was more about interactive. The children actually have said that they actually get to focus better, that they learn how to do that, and that it helps them. One child who was a child who has a challenged learner, she had ADD. She came back and said to her social worker that she loved Mind Up because sometimes when her brain got noisy, that she got quiet and did her breathing and just imagined pulling her brain back into position, and it helped her focus some more. There was another story of a child who was autistic who was really having trouble, and he was shaking his hands, and it was a test they were going to take, so he was getting agitated. And one of the little boys came to the teacher and said, I don't have his name, but this little boy is really having an episode. He said, could we do our mind-up breathing and our brain break right now, and it might help him. So the whole class got together, sat in a circle, and did their breathing, and this child stopped shaking, was ready to take his test. It was very moving. So these kinds of things are incredible. I tell you another great story.
For which, by the way, doctors mindlessly prescribe Ritalin.
Exactly. So there are ways that we can give these kids these tools without medication. There are ways that you do need it, but I think it's overprescribed. Another great story was a little boy came into his room and he was crying, as children do in schools often, and they're not even sure why, and our teachers really aren't equipped to deal with it. So they come in with this stress. So they were all sitting in a circle when the teacher came in, and the little boy was just wiping his eyes, and she said, what's going on? We're doing our mindful breathing because so-and-so little boy is upset. Well, he's upset because his father is going away for 3 months, so I guess he was being deployed. And then each child, there were 3 boys in that circle that said, my father went away too. He had brain cancer, and I couldn't see him for so many days, but he's better now, and he's home. And the other little boy said, well, my mom and dad split up, and I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to see my dad. He said, but then I get to see him every other weekend now, and it's really good. Now, I'm saying this because the community that's built in the classroom because of the empathy building, the perspective taking, how everybody gets to smell the same thing and have a different opinion, or do a brain break where the whole room is quiet. It actually creates interconnectivity, whether we like to see it or not. It's the beautiful thing of the unseen world, is that all of those things are moving around you and creating a family. So they were sharing their stories, making them feel better, bringing them handkerchiefs or things. You know, human kindness is something that a society cannot live without. We will certainly decline and go into ruin without it. So again, building those kind of beautiful attributes is something that, you know, I'm excited about. Let's put it that way. And there are many other stories. I could go on and on. They're pretty great.
I grew up watching you on TV in Western Canada, and I know you love Canada. You created a lot of blessings because you're like giggle dust. But I wanted to know what you thought about American television. There's
some very good things on television, very good. You have to look for them. You have to have the intention to actually want to see good things. But we are fed, in many ways, things, and I say we're fed because some people just turn on TV mindlessly. But we're fed a lot of things that actually undermine the psyche, a lot of negativity, a lot of things that are building sort of a generation of entitlement to know about another person's life, or an entitlement to really behave a certain way or say certain things without conscience. I think it's very damaging, to tell you the truth. I'm not an expert. I would only say that I would monitor my children's television viewing very carefully today. When I was doing television, of course, it was quite different. You know, it was very joyful in many ways. I mean, and there was a lot of poking fun at things, and of course, laughing was one of them. And Disney, yeah. But I think that there is a great responsibility, in a way, of the people that actually are creating content on television. And it's turned, of course, it's obviously about money, but I'd like to see a little bit more conscience.
Are you thinking of bringing your curriculum to inner city schools?
It already is. Okay. It already is in inner city schools. In fact, it's in 20 Newark schools. Newark's a very, very difficult schools, obviously, system and area. We have Mind Up in a lot of those areas. What's interesting about this particular curriculum is that children of affluence also need this, because it really isn't about, you know, how can I basically feel, you know, good about myself. It's how to viscerally connect them to the feeling, to experiential feeling of the being okay, and the idea of having the components that are basically cognitive, right? And giving them these exercises that are fun, changing and shifting the way they feel without being told anything, right? So it works brilliantly that way. So yes, the answer is yes, we are in inner city schools. We're also in charter, we're also in affluent schools. It's across the board, and it's wonderful to see the change, isn't it? And I think it's because they actually think somebody cares. And I think that's a huge part of it.
Hi, Goldie. I love you. I just want to tell you. I love, this is an amazing program that you put together. But my question is, as you guys said, a lot of development is based on how you were brought up as well in your family. So what are you doing with the parents of these children? Is there any type of training that's involved, and how does that go?
That book is for parents.
Oh,
so
the book
that's
is
the
for
first thing that I've actually done that is for parents, caregivers, and teachers. Basically, it's about how to self-manage yourself first before you even think you can begin to manage your children. So it really is a book how to become more self-aware, with also aspects of techniques in there and things you can do with your children as well, right? We are also in the process of looking into building a parent component, because we do have parent meetings and so forth before we implement, but I think we need to have parent groups. And for this, I was down there and I realized there's a parent academy that's been put together in Miami-Dade County. I think it's awesome. So I'd like to replicate that.
You mentioned earlier that technology today is kind of destroying the intimacies that parents and children have. And so my question is, if you were raising Oliver and Katie today, what would you do to ensure that they had a nice solid foundation despite all of the technology that's going on around them, and kind of have the best of two worlds? Because,
well, first of all, I think I threw one computer out. I'm not sure. No, I think that there's time spent on the computer. I think it's great. I think there's time spent outside. I think exercise is vitally, vitally important. It also grows neurons. It's very important for the brain. I think games and competitive sports and these things that our kids were in, they were in hockey and baseball and so forth, is the greatest thing you can do for a kid. Very important what we used to do, and we didn't always get there, but it was our plan and we did a lot. We had family dinners every Sunday because I know that their kids had to run, they had to go, we were running with the food and the thing and the cars and the driving. But Sunday was the time for friends and family to come over, and the kids ate dinner, we ate dinner together. So creating that connectiveness, it was, you know, taking their and diversifying their hours in the day. So it's just being vigilant with your kids. That's it. You know, we all know.
Last year, I spent some time in a monastery in Thailand, and we were doing very intense meditations on impermanence and the fact of our own death. But when I was leaving the monastery, and you know, we had all these very intellectual discussions with the abbot, and he said, I'll tell you the secret of mindfulness in 5 sentences. And I want to leave everybody with the message from my abbot, who was actually half my age. He said the following, and I hope you can remember this. He said, the most important moment in your life is now. The most important person in your life is the one you're with now. The most important activity in your life is what you're doing now. The most important and easy way to be happy is to make somebody else happy now. And the best way to create a future is to be mindful now. And that's what it's all about, right?
I agree.
Thank you.